This is Away, Series 2, a fresh approach to 12-step recovery. I'm your host, Steph Roberts. This is episode 4. In the last episode, we finally made our way through to the end of the beginning. We left off with the so-called first meeting of AA when Bill and Bob meet for the first time in the gatehouse of the Cyberling estate in Akron, Ohio. Hopefully, the concept of synchronicity, as members of AA define it, was clear. It's Dr. Jung who theorized about it, and it works as a concept for the development of AA. Jung's theories were steeped in mysticism. Discussing it with a friend yesterday, I wondered aloud about how Jung would think today about the same concept. We know so much more about the brain. Would science have moved him into new directions? Of course, I like to think so. He was theorizing based on the information available at the time. He published the book Synchronicity, an acausal connecting principle in 1952. The theory is basically that events connected by meaning need not have an explanation in terms of causality, which doesn't generally contradict the axiom of causality, but in specific cases can lead to prematurely giving up causal explanation. Now, while at the time Jung used the concept in arguing for the existence of the paranormal, I would argue that had he been able to further evolve the theory, the aspect of prematurely giving up causal explanation would be more important than using that same idea to explain paranormal activity. People do give up. Most people give up when faced with something clearly beyond their intellectual capabilities. But most people don't then admit that to themselves, right? I like to think just because I don't understand it doesn't mean there isn't an answer. Or just because I don't know it now doesn't mean I never will. So I guess it's my atheist sensibilities that dictate. If he had taken this further and run it parallel to scientific breakthroughs, he may have come to understand paranormal differently. Paranormal denotes events that are beyond the scope of scientific understanding. So, what was perhaps paranormal in 1952 is not now. And what is paranormal now may not be in 100 years. At some point, his theory and neuroscience would intersect, in my opinion. The idea of synchronicity as extending beyond mere coincidence, as well as the paranormal generally, is widely, though not entirely, rejected in the scientific community. If you're interested in reading more about Jung in plain language, I suggest simply psychology.org. And if you'd like to take a deeper visit, go to scholar.google.com and just search for him. There's a world of information about all of this right at your fingertips there. I'm pretty sure no one saw that coming in 1952, the World Wide Web. Just saying. Anyway, as always, I've gotten off track. I'd promised not to take us into any more weeds, so let's climb out and get going on the doctor's opinion. If you're kinda, sorta following along in the book, then open her up now to Roman numerals XXV25. All right. So this is important for a lot of reasons, right? It's a medical doctor who has been trying to help alcoholics almost entirely over at the Little Hospital for Drunks, Towns Hospital, and with very little success. For any medical doctor, but especially for one so familiar with the problem, to put his seal of approval on the program of AA is a big deal. So I'm going to read and discuss some of the most important parts of the letter, or at least they are in my opinion. So his first shorter letter. I have specialized in the treatment of alcoholism for many years. In late 1934, I attended a patient who, though he had been a competent businessman of good earning capacity, was an alcoholic of a type I had become to regard as hopeless. In the course of his third treatment, he acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. As part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present his conceptions to other alcoholics, impressing upon them that they must do likewise with still others. This has become the basis of a rapidly growing fellowship of these men and their families. This man and over 100 others appear to have recovered. I personally know scores of cases who were of the type with whom other methods had failed completely. These facts appear to be of extreme medical importance because of the extraordinary possibilities of rapid growth inherent in this group. They may mark a new epoch in the annals of alcoholism. These men may well have a remedy for thousands of such situations. You may rely absolutely on anything they say about themselves. Very truly yours, William D. Silkworth, MD. This is the first letter that he wrote and was then asked to expound upon. But let's break this one down quickly first. The first line immediately establishes why we should give a shit about this letter, right? Like I said, not only is he a doctor, but this is his jam. He goes on to tell a brief version of the end of Bill's drinking story. That's Bill. Silky is a really big fan of the whole thing and says as much. But here's where we can and should apply a more thoughtful eye. In this letter and the follow-up, it seems to me that Silky is very careful with his words. Quote, he acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. Ideas. Quote, they must do likewise with still others. That's help others. Quote, rapidly growing fellowship. Fellowship. You may rely absolutely on anything they have to say about themselves. Sharing authentic alcoholism. He gets that it makes a difference, one alcoholic talking to another, that the empathy makes a difference, the recognition. Takes one to know one, takes one to help one. Alrighty. Moving right along into the long form of the letter. Hop down to the middle of page XXVII, or 27. We doctors have realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology was of urgent importance to alcoholics, but its application presented difficulties beyond our conception. What with ultra-modern standards, our scientific approach to everything, we are perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside our synthetic knowledge. Okay, so step back again and look at his language. Some form of moral psychology. It's actually incredibly interesting at this very moment in time because the idea of moral psychology has become sort of a hot topic again. Jonathan Haidt being one of the most prolific writers in the field today. It's by no means a new idea. Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates wrote about it. 30 years after Silke wrote the letter, Dr. Lawrence Kohlberg introduced the moral development theory, which was an adaptation of Piaget's stages of moral development. He grouped 6 stages of moral development into 3 levels. Level 1, pre-conventional. Stage 1, obedience and punishment orientation, i.e., how can I avoid punishment? Stage 2, self-interest orientation, i.e., what's in it for me? Level 2, conventional. Stage 3, interpersonal accord and conformity, or social norms, the good boy, good girl attitude. Stage 4, authority and social order maintaining orientation, i.e., law and order morality. Level 3, post-conventional. Stage 5, social contract orientation, speaks for itself. Stage 6, universal ethical principles, or principled conscience. The understanding gained in each stage is retained in later stages, but may be regarded by those in later stages as simplistic. If you read about Freud and the development of the ego, some of this aligns with that. Id, ego, superego, 3 levels. Id being entirely what many people refer to as egocentric. When you're a baby, you only worry about yourself, the things you need, food, so on. There's no understanding of the rest of the world. Ego is actually the development and understanding of yourself as one part of the rest of the world, though it may still be a somewhat selfish period. And development of superego is understanding, basically, this is all oversimplified, you in relation to the rest of the world, how you affect others, the consequences of your actions. So these sort of line up, the development of moral psychology. Anyway, there I go again. So Silke, of course, hasn't read this yet. In fact, he's been dead for more than a decade by the time this is introduced. But Kohlberg had many predecessors. The concept wasn't new. There's, of course, more discussion of the choice of words by Silke online, but I have yet to hear a single big book thumper talk about it. Just saying. So, anyway, of course, he goes on to say, perhaps science has not equipped us well enough. He does not say that we will never understand, only that at the time he was writing, they didn't have the science, and the program seemed like a good solution, at least one that was actually working. The thing is, we have science now to back up why it works, and it isn't magic. We'll revisit that idea later when we look at the steps. Moving on to the next page. We believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, Their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. Frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. The message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. In nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives. Okay, manifestation of an allergy. People love this in AA. In my opinion, they love it for one of two reasons. One reason seems to be, and thankfully this is not the reason in my circle of friends, that it's an excuse. Those people use it as an excuse to relapse. I can't help it. I have a disease. And other people seem to love it for the opposite reason. I feel like these are my people. Because a diagnosis means I can finally do something about it. Does that make sense? Like, I can try a million different remedies for a seasonal cold, but it's not until a doctor tells me it's an infection that I can take antibiotics. A diagnosis gives me power. A diagnosis means I can start doing whatever I can to heal. So the flip side of that is that other group of people. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol. I'm totally on board with that. He's saying that we all seem to agree here. We alkies can't have just one drink. It's the drink itself that we're allergic to. It's the drink that sets the allergy into motion. The antidote to the allergy is therefore not to have the first drink. That's what people mean when they say it's the first drink that gets you drunk. You'll also hear this a lot in AA. If someone told you that you were allergic to strawberries, you'd just stop eating them. I mean, I certainly hope that's true. Of course, alcohol and drugs are more insidious. They literally change your brain chemistry. And that whole habit aspect is problematic. If anyone's a habitual strawberry eater, I mean, maybe this would ring true for them. Habits are hard to break. All habits. Changing is hard. But then you add that whole pesky physical addiction part to it, which is uncomfortable at best, and it's even harder. It can seem insensitive when people make an analogy like that. The core idea there is right. If we're going to roll with Silky on this and call what we have an allergy, then the only choice we really have is to abstain. As for the power greater business, Silky is not saying God here, so take it as you will. Of course, that power can be God. It can also be good, or the fellowship of men and women who all want to help each other achieve the same goal. That's a power greater than you. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. They are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks. This is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery. All right, men and women drink essentially because. So, all men and women who drink like the effect, if they do it, right? But some of us are quickly caught in the vicious cycle because we are allergic. We can't get enough. Dr. Silkworth knows it, and so do we. The idea of being restless, irritable, and discontent without alcohol when you're firmly rooted in your alcoholism is hardly a mystery. There's both a physical and mental need. This, I think, applies to all addiction. Whether or not the smoker knows it, the cigarette itself is not calming him or her. The irritation or irritability is caused by a withdrawal from the nicotine. The cigarette is the vehicle for the nicotine. By feeding the addiction, you feel calmer, even while the drug itself may be causing a higher heart rate or other discomfort. So the vicious cycle continues. He's saying unless the addict experiences an entire psychic change. Psychic. Psychic can mean outside of natural or scientific knowledge, i.e. spiritual, or it can mean simply relating to the mind, mental as opposed to physical. You decide what it means to you. To me, he's saying you got to change the way you think about alcohol. We said that in the last episode. It's time for a complete overhaul in the way you think about alcohol. Remember, it was once an elixir, now it's a poison. Now, this is just the start and may lead to other psychic changes. But if you're a newcomer, start with alcohol. So skipping down, now we're suddenly and easily able to control our desire to drink. More science on that later. And there is science. It's not a miracle. My own experience has been that I no longer need to exercise control of any kind. I literally don't want to drink. A believer says that God removed my desire. I think I rewrote or overwrote or destroyed and wrote a new neural pathway. I replaced one habit with another. I replaced drinking with not drinking. I practiced not drinking until that became the norm. He writes, I do not hold with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control. I have had many men who had, for example, worked a period of months on some problem or business deal which was to be settled on a certain date favorably to them. They took a drink a day or so prior to the date, and then the phenomenon of craving at once became paramount to all other interests, so that the important appointment was not met. These men were not drinking to escape, they were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control. So Silky also believes that we need more than ourselves to make this change. And of course I'm on board. For you, that may be God. It may be good. It may be the group. The idea that a change this big is easier to make with help, that's pretty basic. Then he uses the phrase again, phenomenon of craving. I feel like most people don't have a complete understanding of the word phenomenon. It's a fact, occurrence, or circumstance, observed or observable. So it's not inexplicable, but it is remarkable or extraordinary. So we have extraordinary cravings. Yeah, we know. That's what makes this hard. This is our most base self. You'll hear some people say our lizard brain. You feed it something it likes over and over again, and it wants more and more. And if you're like us and you're allergic, see? Anyway, it's this phenomenon, this extraordinary thing that sets us apart. The doc goes on to describe different personalities that emerge when alcoholics take a drink, but concludes that we all share the same extraordinary craving, the allergy. No matter what else sets us apart from each other, this phenomenon, this remarkable craving, bonds us. This letter goes on to tell the stories of two men's bottoms who used the program to get well. Those men we'll discuss in the next episode and probably start on Bill's story. God help us. As ever, I hope this helped. I promise no matter what, there is a way.